In the vast expanse of space, where the stars were scattered like diamonds on a dark velvet blanket, the galaxy had lived in an uneasy peace. For decades, the powerful Zorith Empire had ruled over the outer sectors, their warships patrolling every corner of the galaxy. The Zorith were feared by all. Their technology was far beyond anything other species had ever seen, and their fleets were nearly invincible. No one dared to challenge them, for it seemed impossible to break their grip. Captain Ethan of the human fleet knew this better than anyone. He had spent years studying the Zorith Empire's strategies, learning their weaknesses, and calculating every possible move. But even he had never expected things to unfold the way they did. The Zorith thought they were untouchable. Hidden away in the dense asteroid fields near the edge of the galaxy, their main fleet was well protected, nearly impossible to find, unless you knew exactly where to look. The human fleet, however, had been watching for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ethan paced back and forth on the command deck of his battleship, the Resolute. His crew was ready, but so were the Zorith. He could feel the tension in the air. They had no idea what they were about to face. "They don't see us coming, sir," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice steady but filled with excitement. She stood at her station, monitoring the Zorith fleet's movements on the screens in front of her. Captain Ethan looked at the map. The Zorith's main fleet was positioned near the asteroid belt, but they were too confident, too comfortable. They believed their defenses were unbreachable. But that was before humanity came up with a plan no one saw coming. "We have one shot at this," Captain Ethan said, his voice low. "Make it count." The human fleet had been silently maneuvering through the asteroid fields, using the debris as cover. For the Zorith, the idea that anyone could hide in these dangerous fields was laughable. But the humans had something the Zorith didn't: resourcefulness. Using their ingenuity, the humans had constructed stealth technology that allowed them to move in the shadows, undetected. For hours, Ethan's fleet had been silently advancing, inching closer to the Zorith's vulnerable flank. The Zorith ships, large and imposing, cruised lazily, unaware of the threat lurking nearby. The time had come. "Now," Ethan commanded, his heart pounding in his chest. "Take them by surprise." The crew of the Resolute sprang into action, their movements coordinated and practiced. The first wave of attacks launched with incredible precision. The Zorith ships were caught off guard, their massive warships exploding in brilliant flashes of light. It was as if a quiet storm had suddenly erupted around them, leaving their once feared fleet reeling. The Zorith scrambled to respond, their command centers in chaos. Communications were lost as human fighters weaved through the enemy lines, firing from every direction. Despite their size and strength, the Zorith were not prepared for this kind of attack. "This is impossible," a Zorith commander shouted as his ship shook under the barrage of fire. "How are they here?" Back on the Resolute, Ethan's heart raced. The first strike had been successful, but the battle was far from over. He could see the Zorith were beginning to regroup, sending reinforcements to retaliate. He had expected this, and he had a plan. But the real question was, would it be enough? Lieutenant Harper's voice broke through the tension. "They're launching counterattacks, Captain. We need to act fast." Ethan gritted his teeth. He knew this moment would come, but now that it was here, the pressure was unimaginable. His fleet had already taken a few hits, and the Zorith were preparing their most advanced weapons. If they could unleash those, the tide of battle might turn against them. "We won't let them win," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare the next wave. We hit them where it hurts. Right now, we have the upper hand, but it won't last long." As the battle raged on, Captain Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. For years, humans had been underestimated by the rest of the galaxy. No one thought they could stand against the might of the Zorith Empire. But now, the humans had turned the tables. The Zorith, once the feared rulers of space, were being pushed back, forced to fight for their survival. And Ethan knew deep down, that this was just the beginning. They had a long way to go before the Zorith realized the true strength of humanity. "All hands, prepare for the next strike," Ethan ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We take this fight to them. They will learn today that no one is safe from the humans." The battle continued to rage in the cold void of space. The stars flickered in the distance, the only light in the vast darkness of the battlefield. The Zorith Empire had never been challenged like this before. Their once proud fleet, used to dominating entire sectors of the galaxy, was now on the defensive, forced to retreat in disarray. Captain Ethan stood on the command deck of the Resolute, watching the chaos unfold before him. His crew worked quickly, responding to the Zorith's retaliatory strikes with the precision that had made them a formidable force. The sudden shock of the human attack had sent ripples throughout the Zorith ranks, but now, as expected, they were starting to regroup. "They're adjusting their formations," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice steady. "They're trying to push us back." Ethan nodded, his mind working rapidly. He had anticipated the Zorith would try to regain control, but what he hadn't expected was how quickly they could adapt. The Zorith had underestimated humanity's ability to learn and strike back. But now, they were about to learn what happened when you pushed humans into a corner. "We can't let them regain the upper hand," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "Focus all fire on their command ship. If we take that down, their forces will fall apart." Harper nodded, her fingers flying over the controls. The human ships, agile and smaller than their Zorith counterparts, darted through the battlefield, dodging enemy fire with ease. The Zorith, unable to keep up with their speed, struggled to land a hit. Ethan's eyes flicked to the tactical display, where the Zorith command ship appeared as a massive, imposing silhouette against the backdrop of the stars. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by smaller Zorith warships, but it was also their most vulnerable point. If they could disable it, the rest of the fleet would crumble. "All ships, focus on that command ship," Ethan ordered. "We break their command, and the rest will fall into chaos." The Resolute and the rest of the human fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing with deadly accuracy. The Zorith responded with fury, firing their most advanced weapons. The vacuum of space was filled with the soundless echoes of explosions as the two fleets clashed, each side trying to claim control of the battlefield. "We're taking hits, Captain," shouted the ship's engineer, his voice laced with urgency. "Shields are holding, but we can't take many more hits like that." Ethan gritted his teeth. They were close. They had to push through, no matter the cost. "Hold steady. We've got this," he said, trying to reassure his crew. But inside, his heart was pounding. They were far from safe. Then, a sudden shift. The Zorith command ship began to break away from its fleet, moving to a safer position behind its defensive perimeter. It was clear they were trying to protect it with everything they had. The human forces, undeterred, pushed forward even harder. "We can't let them regroup," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice intense. "We've got one shot at this. If we lose it, they'll retaliate with everything they've got." Ethan's mind raced. He had seen the Zorith retaliate before, but this time, the stakes were much higher. He knew they couldn't afford a second chance. If they hesitated now, the balance of the battle could tip in the Zorith's favor. "Get us closer," Ethan ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're going for it. No more holding back." The ship surged forward, cutting through the chaos, as the crew focused all their efforts on taking down the command ship. The Zorith were doing everything they could to defend it, launching counterattacks from every direction. But the humans were relentless. The human fleet had something the Zorith didn't: determination. Every shot fired from the Resolute was one step closer to their goal. The Zorith ships were beginning to falter, their formations breaking down as they scrambled to protect their command ship. But they weren't quick enough. "Fire on the command ship's weak spot," Ethan barked. "We've got them now." A barrage of energy blasts hit the Zorith command ship, each shot finding its mark. The Zorath commander, watching from his bridge, couldn't believe what he was seeing. His once invincible fleet was crumbling before his eyes. This can't be happening, the Zorath commander muttered, panic creeping into his voice. The Zorath command ship, now heavily damaged, shuddered under the onslaught. Explosions rocked its hull, and it began to break apart, its defenses failing one by one. "We've got them," Harper shouted, her face breaking into a grin, but Ethan knew better than to celebrate too soon. There was still more to be done. The rest of the fleet was still out there, and they weren't about to let humanity win so easily. "Keep pushing forward," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "We've broken their command. Now we finish this." The tide of battle had shifted, but the war was far from over. The humans had proven they were more than a match for the Zorath, but as the battle raged on, they would soon find out just how far the Zorath would go to protect their empire. The explosion of the Zorath command ship echoed through the battlefield, sending shockwaves across the galaxy. But even as the massive vessel broke apart, the Zorath forces didn't crumble as expected. They were a people known for their resilience, and now their true strength was about to be revealed. Captain Ethan watched the battlefield unfold before him. The Zorath fleet had been thrown into disarray, but their remaining ships were rallying together, forming a last-ditch defensive perimeter. Their remaining ships were heavier, more durable, and had been reinforced with the best weapons they could manage. "We've taken down their command ship, Captain," Lieutenant Harper reported, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. "But they're regrouping. They're not going down without a fight." Ethan nodded, his fingers gripping the edge of the command console. He knew this was coming. The Zorath weren't the type to surrender easily. This was their last chance to hold on to their empire, and they'd throw everything they had into it. "Deploy all fighters," Ethan ordered. "We can't let them recover. If we give them a chance, they'll launch a counterattack like nothing we've ever seen." Harper immediately gave the orders, and a wave of human fighter ships surged from the Resolute. They darted across the battlefield, small but agile, weaving between the larger warships, their weapons blazing as they took on the Zorath's defensive lines. The human fighters were quick, but the Zorath's remaining ships were tougher than expected. "They're using their strongest ships as a shield," the tactical officer reported, analyzing the enemy's formation. "If we don't take down those battleships, the smaller ships won't be able to get through." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He knew this was it. The Zorath were making their final stand. The remaining battleships in their fleet were well armored, but they were slow, and that's where humanity's advantage lay. The human ships were smaller, more maneuverable, and they had learned from the mistakes of the past. "We have to break through their front lines," Ethan said firmly. "We can't waste time. Every minute we delay is another chance for them to regroup. All ships, focus fire on their frontmost battleships. Take them down and open a gap for the fighters." The Resolute and the rest of the human fleet turned their attention to the Zorath's front lines. The two sides collided with fierce intensity, massive energy blasts lighting up the dark void of space. The Zorath ships fought back with everything they had, but they were at a disadvantage. Their ships may have been more powerful, but the human ships were faster, using their agility to stay one step ahead. Ethan gripped the console as another Zorath battleship exploded in front of them, but the victory was short-lived. The remaining Zorath forces launched an unexpected counterattack, pushing the humans back. The battlefield shifted, and the humans found themselves struggling to maintain their position. "Shields down to 30%, Captain," shouted the engineer. "We need to fall back, or we'll lose the Resolute." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to let panic set in. If they retreated now, everything they had fought for would be in vain. The Zorath would regroup and come after them with a vengeance. "No retreat," Ethan shouted. "Push forward. We can't stop now." As the Resolute and the human fleet advanced, the Zorath's remaining ships unleashed a brutal barrage of firepower. It was clear they had nothing left to lose. The remaining Zorath battleships were closing in, their weapons aiming directly at the Resolute. The human fleet's shields flickered under the pressure. "Captain, if we don't act now, we'll lose everything," Harper said urgently. "Their final line is too strong. We need a way to break through." Ethan's mind raced as he scanned the battlefield. The Zorath were aggressive, but their last-ditch efforts had left them vulnerable. The remaining battleships were heavily armed, but their defensive systems had been stretched thin trying to protect each other. "That's it," Ethan muttered to himself. "We go for the weak point." He turned to Harper. "Prepare the Resolute for a direct assault. All fighters, prepare for a coordinated strike on their rear flank." The human fleet shifted their focus, leaving the front battleships behind to concentrate on the Zorath's more vulnerable rear. As the human ships moved into position, the Zorath forces realized too late what was happening. "Now," Ethan ordered. The human fleet surged forward, using their speed to outmaneuver the Zorath battleships. The fighters swooped in behind the Zorath rear, attacking their weak points with deadly precision. The Zorath, unable to keep up with the sudden shift in attack, found their defenses crumbling. One by one, the Zorath battleships began to fall. Explosions ripped through their hulls, their shields buckling under the onslaught. The humans had found their way in, and the Zorath were finally beginning to retreat. But Ethan knew better than to celebrate. The war wasn't over. It wasn't even close. "We've broken their back," Harper said, breathless, but Ethan's face was grim. "Stay sharp," he said. "This isn't over yet. We've won a battle, but the war is far from finished." As the Zorath fleet began to retreat into the vastness of space, Ethan knew the hardest part was yet to come. The humans had delivered a crushing blow, but the Zorath weren't going to let this loss go without a fight. And soon, the humans would face an even greater challenge. The battle had shifted, but it wasn't over yet. The Zorath were regrouping, retreating into the deep expanse of space. But they weren't defeated. Ethan stood at the helm of the Resolute, watching as the battle-damaged ships limped back to the safety of their formation. It wasn't a complete victory, yet. "Status report," Ethan commanded, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. "Shields are at 50%, Captain," Lieutenant Harper replied. "We've lost 4 ships in the fleet, and many of the others are severely damaged. But we've pushed them back for now. They're retreating." "That's not enough," Ethan muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "They're regrouping. We can't let them prepare for another strike." "They're in disarray, but they'll pull themselves together," Harper added, her voice strained. "We can't be sure how long we have before they make their next move." Ethan clenched his fists. The Zorath were dangerous. They were relentless. The humans had managed to land a critical blow, but the Zorath would never give up so easily. They would lick their wounds, rebuild their forces, and return with everything they had. The question wasn't if they would strike again. It was when. "Prepare for the worst," Ethan ordered. "Patch up the ships as best as you can. We'll be ready if they come back." But even as he said those words, his mind raced with doubt. The Zorath weren't just a military force. They were a symbol of fear across the galaxy. Everyone feared them because they had the power to crush entire civilizations. But now, for the first time, humans had forced them to retreat. And in the depths of space, that single fact was enough to shift the balance of power. The Zorath had always believed themselves untouchable, but now they knew they weren't. The entire galaxy would take notice, and that included more than just the Zorath. As the human fleet moved into defensive positions, a strange sense of unease settled over Ethan. He looked up, staring at the holographic display of the galaxy. The map showed the familiar constellations of the Zorath Empire, but now there were anomalies in the data: strange ships, unfamiliar signatures, and encrypted communications. "Sir, we're picking up strange signals on the outer rim," said Ensign Drake from the communications deck. "It's not Zorath. These are something else, something we haven't encountered before." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Can you triangulate their position?" "Affirmative. It's a fleet of unknown origin, and they're heading in our direction. We think it's some kind of reinforcement, but we don't have full data yet." A new wave of fear swept over Ethan. Reinforcements? From who? And why now? "Do we have any information on their capabilities?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. "Nothing solid yet, but the energy readings are high. Too high for any known species in this sector," Drake replied. This wasn't just a routine military move. Whoever these new ships were, they had the power to challenge everything the humans had worked for. "They must have been watching the battle," Harper said quietly. "They saw the Zorath retreat, and now they're coming to fill the void." Ethan nodded slowly. It was the only explanation that made sense. The Zorath weren't the only ones looking for control. With the Zorath's power weakened, other factions would inevitably seek to take their place. Ethan stood silently, contemplating the unknown fleet that was headed their way. The universe was vast, and as much as humanity had gained ground, there were forces in the dark corners of space that would stop at nothing to seize control. Humanity had made an enemy of the Zorath, but now they had also caught the attention of something far more dangerous, something that wouldn't hesitate to crush them if they were weak. The question was no longer just about the Zorath. The battle for the galaxy was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. "We can't afford to underestimate them," Ethan said finally, determination filling his voice. "Prepare the fleet. This new threat isn't just a challenge, it's a message." "A message?" Harper asked, confusion crossing her face. "They're telling us that we're no longer the only players in this game," Ethan replied. "And we're going to need every bit of strength we have to survive." As the unknown fleet drew closer, the humans braced themselves. They had taken down the Zorath, but now they had to face something far more insidious. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this battle would be unlike anything they had ever faced before. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity was about to find out just how much danger they were truly in. In this part, the suspense grows as the arrival of an unknown fleet suggests an even bigger challenge is coming. It keeps the audience on edge, wondering who these new players are and what threat they pose. The shift in power, along with the introduction of a mysterious new threat, deepens the intrigue and sets the stage for even higher stakes. As the strange fleet drew closer, tension rippled through the human fleet like an electric current. Ethan stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. The unknown ships were unlike anything they had encountered before. Sleek, angular, and emitting strange energy readings that only deepened the mystery. The crew worked tirelessly to analyze the data, but every new piece of information brought more questions than answers. "Sir," Harper spoke up, her voice tight with concern. "We've picked up a transmission from the unknown fleet. It's in a language we've never seen before. We can't even begin to decode it." Ethan's grip tightened around the armrest of his chair. "What does that mean? Are they preparing for a fight?" Harper hesitated. "We don't know. The message is repeating every few minutes. It's almost like a warning. But there's nothing in it we can make sense of." "Great," Ethan muttered under his breath. The situation was rapidly deteriorating, and they didn't have enough answers to act decisively. A warning? Or a threat? It could mean anything. "Captain," Ensign Drake's voice crackled through the intercom, "we're picking up additional readings. The energy levels are off the charts, far beyond anything we've encountered, and we believe they're targeting us." The cold weight of fear settled over Ethan. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a minor skirmish. Whoever these aliens were, they were coming for the humans, and they weren't coming with peaceful intentions. "Prepare for battle," Ethan ordered, his voice low but firm. "But we're not starting this fight. We'll stand our ground, but we won't fire unless provoked." The command was met with a quick acknowledgement from the bridge crew, and the human fleet began to position itself in a defensive formation. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't afford to make a rash decision. If these ships were truly as powerful as the readings suggested, a full-scale engagement could mean the end of everything. Yet, they couldn't back down. They had already made enemies of the Zorith, and now they were facing something far more dangerous. Retreat wasn't an option. The hours stretched on as they waited. Tension gnawed at Ethan's nerves. Every minute that passed felt like a ticking time bomb, and the unknown fleet was drawing closer, their intent still shrouded in mystery. Harper's voice broke through the thick silence. "Captain, we've analyzed the signal one more time. There's something strange about it. It's not just a threat or a warning. It's a call." "A call," Ethan repeated, furrowing his brow. "Yes, it's like they're broadcasting something to the rest of the galaxy. They're trying to summon something. But what, we don't know." The hair on the back of Ethan's neck stood up. This was no longer just a matter of survival. It was a matter of what else was out there. Who else was listening? The Zorith might be defeated, but this new threat was part of something far bigger. They were calling for reinforcements, or worse, allies. Suddenly, the calm of space was shattered by a loud, shrieking alarm. The unknown fleet was no longer holding back. Massive energy blasts surged toward the human fleet, striking one of the outer ships with incredible force. The explosion lit up the void of space, a burst of light so bright it temporarily blinded the crew. "Return fire," Ethan shouted as the bridge went into chaos. "Weapons, full power. We won't let them take us down without a fight." The Resolute jolted as the first wave of energy blasts hit its shields, but they held strong. The human ships retaliated with their own weaponry, firing back with precision, but the unknown fleet's vessels were faster and more resilient than anything they had faced before. As the battle raged on, the question that loomed over Ethan was no longer just how to win. It was whether they could even survive this fight. The unknown fleet had made their intentions clear. They were here to destroy the humans. The hum of the engines, the crackle of the weapons, the flashes of light in the vastness of space. Everything seemed to blur together in a chaotic dance of destruction. But in the midst of it all, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whoever these aliens were, they had come for something far beyond a simple battle. This was an invasion of the highest order. And as the first wave of destruction seemed to subside, the true horror set in. The fleet wasn't alone. More ships were emerging from the dark void of space, their shapes barely visible at first, but soon growing into monstrous forms that dwarfed the human vessels. These ships weren't like anything humanity had ever encountered. They were massive, sprawling, and filled with power. It was as if the unknown fleet was not only here to challenge the humans, but to bring an entire army to bear. Ethan's heart raced as he processed the terrifying reality that lay before them. The Zorith were nothing compared to what was now emerging from the shadows. "This isn't just a battle," Ethan said, his voice cold with realization. "This is a war." The human fleet's shields flickered under the relentless barrage of alien fire. Ethan gripped the edge of his chair tightly, his knuckles white. The Resolute had taken some serious hits, but it was holding its ground. His crew, though battle-hardened, had never faced anything like this before. The unknown fleet had far more firepower, and their ships were unlike any human technology. Harper's voice rang through the bridge. "Captain, we're losing ships at an alarming rate. We can't sustain this for much longer. We need a plan." Ethan looked around the bridge, his mind racing. They had no choice but to fight back with everything they had. But what could they do against an enemy that seemed unstoppable? How could they even think of victory when they were outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed? "Are the fleet's weapons ready?" Ethan asked, trying to sound calm. "They're as ready as they can be, but we're limited," Ensign Drake replied, his voice tight. "We can't launch another round of heavy fire until we recharge." "That's not going to give us enough time," Ethan muttered, staring at the holographic display of the enemy fleet. In the distance, the first of the alien reinforcements arrived, their massive ships filling the view screen. They were incomprehensibly large, bigger than anything humanity had ever seen. The sheer scale of them was enough to instill terror into even the most seasoned soldiers. A strange hum vibrated through the ship, a low, almost imperceptible sound that seemed to resonate deep within Ethan's bones. He didn't have time to analyze it, but the feeling of something unnatural was too strong to ignore. "Captain," Harper said again, "there's something off about their formations. They're not attacking in the usual tactical way. It's almost as if they're waiting for something. I don't know what, but..." Suddenly, the alien ship shifted. A massive glowing portal opened in space, a swirling vortex of energy that bent the very fabric of space itself. Ethan's eyes widened. This wasn't just a fleet. It was a force unlike anything they could comprehend. The portal expanded, sending waves of strange energy pulsing through the battlefield. "What is that?" Ethan breathed, trying to make sense of it. "It's a dimensional rift," Harper said. "They're opening some kind of gateway, but for what purpose?" Ethan's mind reeled. A rift. That meant reinforcements weren't just coming from the ships they could see. This was the opening of an entire dimension, a force of untold power about to spill into their reality. "No," Ethan said, voice firm with determination. "We can't let them get any further. They'll tear this entire galaxy apart." Harper's hands flew over her console. "I've got an idea," she said quickly. "If I can reroute the power from our shields to the main cannon, we may be able to fire a concentrated blast right into the heart of that rift. But it's going to be a risk. It could destabilize our shields completely." Ethan's eyes darted between the viewport and Harper's station. The rift was growing wider by the second. The unknown fleet was preparing to pour through, and once that happened, there was no telling what would emerge from it. They were running out of time. "Do it," he said. "We have no other choice." Harper nodded, her fingers flying over the console as she rerouted the ship's power. The hum of energy coursing through the Resolute was intense, and the entire ship seemed to tremble. Ethan's grip on the chair tightened again. This was their only shot. "Ready, Captain," Harper said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. Ethan stared at the growing rift on the screen. He didn't hesitate. "Fire." The Resolute's main cannon erupted with a blinding burst of energy, a beam of concentrated power that tore through space itself. The bolt of energy shot toward the rift with blinding speed, cutting through the alien fleet's formation. It hit the heart of the rift. And for a moment, everything went still. Then the universe seemed to tremble. The rift began to pulse violently, its edges tearing apart as the energy from the cannon destabilized it. The alien ships closest to the rift were torn apart in an explosion of light and fire, their advanced armor unable to withstand the intense energy release. The rift began to collapse in on itself, pulling everything around it into the swirling void. "Did it work?" Harper asked, her voice shaky. Ethan watched the chaotic aftermath unfold on the screen. The rift was collapsing, but the alien fleet wasn't entirely defeated. Some ships had been consumed by the energy burst, but others were beginning to pull back, retreating into the depths of space. The Resolute systems were beginning to flicker and fail from the strain of the blast. The ship was badly damaged, but it had done its job. They had disrupted the rift, and the immediate threat was over. But the battle was far from won. The enemy wasn't gone, not by a long shot. And Ethan knew that whatever was left in the wake of the rift could be even more dangerous. As the Resolute limped through space, battered but standing strong, Ethan realized something. They hadn't just faced an alien fleet today. They had faced something far older and more powerful than anything they had ever imagined. And the fight was far from over. The Resolute drifted through the void, its hull battered and scarred from the previous battle. The once pristine warship now looked like a survivor of a nightmare, its systems struggling to stay online as crew members worked tirelessly to keep the ship functional. Despite the damage, the ship was still operational, and that was all that mattered. Ethan sat in the captain's chair, his mind racing. The rift had closed, but the war was far from over. The alien fleet had retreated, but only temporarily. They would regroup. They would adapt, and when they returned, They would bring reinforcements. Of that, Ethan was certain. But what would they face next? And how would humanity ever stand a chance against such overwhelming power? "Captain," Harper's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood at the console, eyes focused on the ship's scanners. "We're not alone. There's something else out there. Something different." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had been expecting the alien fleet to regroup, but whatever Harper was seeing, it was beyond his comprehension. "What do you mean, different?" Ethan asked, leaning forward in his chair, his instincts kicking into high gear. Harper's hands flew over her console, pulling up a series of strange energy readings. "These readings aren't consistent with anything we've seen before. It's not the alien fleet, but it's something just as powerful. It's coming from deep in the system." Ethan's mind spun. A new threat? Or something worse than what they had already faced? "Can you pinpoint it?" he asked, trying to remain calm despite the sense of impending doom creeping into his chest. Harper nodded. "I can, but I don't like the look of this, Captain. This isn't just another fleet. This is something else, something older." "Prepare the ship for battle," Ethan ordered, rising from his chair. His voice was steady, but his mind was anything but. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and now there was something else, something ancient, waiting for them in the dark. The crew moved with precision, despite the exhaustion from the previous battle. They had been through hell, and now they were being thrust right back into the heart of danger. Ethan had to trust them. He had no other choice. As they prepared for the unknown, the tension in the air was palpable. The unknown energy signature continued to grow, and with every passing moment, it became clearer. Something terrible was coming, and humanity's very survival was once again at risk. "Captain," Harper said, her voice tight with apprehension, "we're receiving a transmission." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. After everything that had happened, they had barely managed to scrape through alive. A transmission now could only mean one thing. "What's the message?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but with a layer of dread. The screen flickered to life, and a voice filled the bridge. It was deep, resonant, and alien, though not from the fleet they had just faced. "You have no idea what you've awakened," the voice intoned, sending a wave of fear through the crew. "You thought you were safe, but now you have attracted the attention of the true masters, and we will not let you live." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Ethan's blood ran cold. The true masters, who were they? What had they just unleashed upon the galaxy? Harper turned to him, her face pale. "What now, Captain?" Ethan stared at the screen, his thoughts racing. The alien fleet, the rift, and now this. There was a pattern, something much larger than he could understand. But one thing was clear. Humanity was about to face something far worse than it could have ever imagined. "We fight," Ethan said, his voice resolute. "We stand and fight for humanity's future, whatever it takes." But as he spoke those words, a sense of dread settled deep within him. They had survived the first wave, but this was different. The true masters were coming, and their wrath would be unlike anything humanity had ever faced before. The Resolute powered up its weapons, but deep down, Ethan knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever was coming, it was far bigger and far more dangerous than anything they had encountered before. And the galaxy would never be the same again.